Hey again. In this video, it's like I did with my reboot of books on Greek mythology. I'm doing sort of a reboot for books on Roman mythology. The original video I did some time ago was Greek and Roman mythology. I thought it was a little too long and involved, and I want to separate the two. But it's really hard to separate the two completely because a lot of the books that are in Roman mythology have Greek mythology in it, because the Romans have took so much material from the Greeks. Uh, some say that do Romans even have a mythology of their own? And the thing is that they actually do. It's usually in the form of legends, legends that have taken place in the dim past, one before Rome existed, and then up through the earlier period when Rome was a monarchy, and stories about the early republic, and finally stories about when it became an empire. There's of course a lot fewer books, and these are books that are mostly written in Latin, of course, since that was the language of the Romans. And I want to concentrate on some Latin works as well as general works that focus more on Roman myths as opposed to Greek myths. The first book I want to mention is now this is a very strange book because, like I said, I want to focus on Roman myths, but this book has a lot of Greek mythology in it. It's the very famous The Metamorphoses by Ovid. Now, the reason why I'm including this in the video on Roman myths, even though so much in here is Greek mythology, is because, well, number one, it's a Latin work, and it shows just how much the Latin writers and the Romans took from the Greeks and kind of put it into their own literature. So it's kind of the origin is Greek myth, but it's kind of like now part of the Latin Roman universe. And also in this book, there are some native Roman myths as apart from the early Greek myths. So these stories are all stories of transformations where there's a problem, and at the end somebody turns into something else. That's how come it's called The Metamorphosis. So it's Ovid, The Metamorphosis. This is a must-read for both Greek and Roman mythology. I didn't include it in my Greek mythology video because I tried to stick to works that were originally written in ancient Greek as opposed to this. This is a Latin work. And this particular translation is really beautiful. It's by Horace Gregory. And I'll have these books down in the thing. Now, before I go on with other books, I want to mention a couple of books that I included in my previous video on Greek myths. And again, they're introductory books because I think they're really important to, if you want to get yourself acclimated to the Greek and Roman myths, is this wonderful book, which I mentioned in my other video. I'll mention it briefly here: Mythology by Edith Hamilton. Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and a little bit of Norse mythology. If you want something more of a textbook, again, a book on classical mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology by Morford and Lenardon. It has bits of translations from classical works, and it's written by it's a little more of a textbook than the previous one. Okay, now another book, two books that give you an overview of Roman mythology and really stick to Roman mythology, are these two wonderful books. One of them, which I really enjoyed, is a book simply called Roman Myths. So hardly any Greek mythology in here. There's really Roman mythology, and it's by Michael Grant. And this is a great book. It really tells you about Roman myths, and so it's a very scholarly book. It takes some patience to read, but it's really well done. If you want a lighter book, a little thinner, a little easier to read, but really packed with information and amazing illustrations, there's this great book put out by the legendary past called Roman Myths, and it's by Jane F. Gardner. Okay, and it's Roman Myths, and again, really wonderful stories on some of the essential legends that were important to the Romans at the time. So these two books these two books are great. They're a central reading. Another book that sometimes it's not included in Roman mythology, but it is an important mythology of the Italian peninsula, and it was part of the culture that existed before Rome rose to prominence, and that was the culture of the Etruscans. And there's another wonderful book put out by the legendary past, and it's called Etruscan Myths. And I think this is important. It shouldn't be overshadowed too much by Roman mythology, because the Etruscans were an important civilization before Rome, and they had their own myths. And this is a great book, because I think it's like I said, it's part of the Italian peninsula, and I think it should be included. And the writers are Larissa Bonfante and Judith Swaddling, and I'll have them in the description below. I really enjoyed this book. Now, getting into some translations of some Latin classics. I already showed you the Ovid of Metamorphoses as a quintessential collection, an absolutely quintessential collection of Greek and Roman mythology that you absolutely have to read if you want to learn about classical mythology in general, whether it's Greek and Roman. But another book that is essential reading is, of course, the Aeneid by Virgil. This translation is by Fitzgerald. It's a beautiful translation. There are many out there. Doesn't matter which one you read. They're all pretty good. Although I'm sure people argue which one's the best. Oh, no, you can't read this one. You got to read this one. Whatever. But Fitzgerald is very serviceable. It's very, very nicely written. Now, what's nice about this book is well, there's two things about this book. Not only is it really important in Western civilization, the role this book had to play, but some would say it's strictly not mythology, because see, mythology is based on these old stories that have been told over a long time, whereas this book was ordered to be written by Augustus Caesar. He asked Virgil I want you to write Rome's great epic. And so he sat down and invented a lot of crap, and he put it in this book. So some would say, is it really Roman mythology, or is it a modern, an epic to give to the Roman people? Now, it is based on the myth of Aeneas, who back in the Iliad and other writings on the Trojan War really was a mythological figure who was the son of Aphrodite, and he escaped when Troy was burned down, and you don't hear about him anymore. So Virgil kind of picks up the story of Aeneas and his further wanderings, and how he landed in Italy and became the great ancestor of the Roman people. I like I said, some would say, is it strictly mythology? Well, I don't know, maybe not, but it's still an amazing read. It's based on the myth of Aeneas and how he escaped the burning, and also this book is really great because chapter 2 really goes into the fall of Troy. Chapter 2 is really amazing, how it talks about everything that, how the Trojan horse was, how, the horse was pulled into Troy, and how the Greeks snuck out and burned down the city. And it's very important. It's just an amazing piece of literature. So again, is it truly Roman mythology? I don't know, but it's a central reading if you want to delve into anything related to Roman mythology and great Latin literature in general. In my last video on Greek mythology, I mentioned a great Greek epic called the Argonautica, or the Voyage of Argo, which is about Jason and the Argonauts. Well, I discovered by accident that there's a Latin version. There's a Latin version of that same story. It's very similar, but it's a little different, and it's called The Voyage of All Go. Again, I know you're going to yell at me. This is really Greek mythology in the hands of Latin writers. Okay, I'm guilty. But like I said, so much of Latin and Roman mythology was just so picked up from ancient Greece. So it's really hard to avoid ancient Greek myths. But this is a late Latin version of the Voyage of All Go, and it's by Gaius Valerius Flaccus, and this translation is by Slavitt, and I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was great. I'm going to leave you with two more books. Just like I mentioned in the video on Greek mythology, you have to spend some time with the three tragedians. Well, Rome had a great tragic writer too, a playwright, Seneca. Seneca gave us again. It's Greek mythology, mostly Greek mythology, but it's told in the hands of a Roman. It's in Latin, and he gives us 6 tragedies. And Seneca, if you remember, he was also a philosopher. He was the tutor of Nero. He was forced to commit suicide. But these 6 tragedies are really good. They're really grim. I mean, Romans had a much more visceral, bloody version of things, So if you like plays and you want to get a sample of how were mythological materials handled by Roman playwrights, you can't go wrong with this. I really enjoyed it. Again, the kernel of it is mostly from ancient Greece rather than myths from Rome. But like I said, it's still great reading, and it's Latin interpretations of very ancient myths. And I'm going to mention one more epic. Sometimes this is not included as Roman mythology, but I still think it's kind of important. It's basically a book by Lucan. He was he knew Nero back then, and he was also forced to commit suicide. And he wrote something called the Civil War, and it seems to be a bit of a forgotten epic. It sometimes is known as Pharsalia, but the more accurate name is Civil War, and it basically is about the civil war that happened in Rome when Julius Caesar was fighting the other main powerful person, Pompey. And the two of them, there were 2 different sides, and there was a great civil war. And Lucan decided to write about it, and unfortunately, he died before he finished it, so it's incomplete. But I understand that it used to compete with the Aeneid in terms of great epics from Rome. Some people like the Aeneid better, some people like Civil War better. And over the years, the Civil War by Lucan doesn't seem to be talked about as much, but everybody loves the Aeneid. I like the Aeneid better too, but you shouldn't discount what do you call it? The Civil War. Is it true Roman mythology? Again, it's probably like the Aeneid. A lot of stuff is probably made up, in here. He mythologized a lot of what happened during the Roman War to make it more exciting. But still, it's great reading. But if you really want to get away from, if you're really angry and you want to get away from anything Greek, I recommend hunting down, get Ovid's Metamorphoses and do a little research and find out which stories in here out of the many are more Roman than off the top. I mean, I know which ones, but off the top of my head, I don't remember, and it'll make the video a little too long for me to go through what are more precisely Roman myths as opposed to Greek myths. And also, if you just want to stick to Rome, like these 2 books are great. Oh, sorry, this one's upside down. Roman Myths by Grant and Gardner's Roman Myths by the Legendary Past. Okay, so until next time.